the key about what Brad Holmes is saying is when he's saying, like, look, man, these guys, they're developmental pieces. We don't have to trust or rely on a rookie in the rookie season to be that impact player for your team. If that guy doesn't connect, then we're going to be like, yeah, that was a need because we missed a player because we were chasing a certain prototype. So just get good players that you like, any position that is. And when I look back at some of these recent drafts, I think that ability has also allowed, you can make the case, the Lions to land guys many times, specifically in the first and second round, that they may feel is, hey, this is the best player available, but specifically, he's the best player at his position in this year's draft. Now, everybody's going to have different grades on that, but even this most recently, Terion Arnold, he was picked 24. Terion Arnold, to me, was the best cornerback in the draft. Afterward, Brad Holmes told us that was their top cornerback in the draft. So even Terion Arnold had a very up and down rookie season. But if you looked at Terion Arnold, what he did, for me, critical factors is what got him drafted specifically in the first round. It was about the ball skills and the upside, the ability to play fast. It was about the reactive athleticism, while all the positional factors were a little bit more middling. And those things needed development, as we saw last year. Like, there was some real bumps along the way, but also that's understandable because he was a 24th pick in the draft that had those factors to be a first round pick. And that was a developmental pick looking at it. Now, he got his way onto the field because he was still our best option. But ultimately, it took some time, and that got towards the end of the season, it looked much better. He improved so much throughout the year. Look at a lot of these other draft class, even the ones where you can say, well, this guy was in the second round, right? So we can still get that guy at 28. That's true, but if you think about Sam Laporta or Brian Branch, I would be pretty comfortable saying and not be surprised if the Lions would have had those two players at the top of their position in that year's draft. Tight end that year was Michael Mayer, who went first. Wouldn't shock me at all if the Lions thought that Sam Laporta was the better tight end. If you look at Brian Branch, they probably had him as their top nickel player in that year's draft. And obviously he went to safety and looked really good as well. But that is, now a position that these teams are also including. He was probably their top nickel. It just so happens that those guys fall in drafts if you don't feel as comfortable with them playing outside, which is possible for Jahdae Barron this year, which could allow a team to potentially find a guy that they believe is, hey, that's the top of their position, but he fell down the board because it's kind of hard to find the exact pinpoint spot for that player. And then if you look at the other years, of course they got that, but they got it at what we consider more premium positions because of the fact that they were picking much higher. Aiden Hutchinson, top defensive end, top edge rusher in that draft. Penei Sewell, their top offensive tackle in that draft. But you're getting a little bit less of those premium positions specifically, which is why those premium guys that you initially brought in, which is your edge rushers, your offensive linemen that we know we have to pay, you're going to pay those guys because you're not going to be at the spot where you're going to likely be able to land like, hey, that's my top offensive tackle in the draft. We got him at 24. Like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Now, it could this year because of injuries to Josh Simmons. He could land that far back in the draft, but it's not as likely anymore that ends up being the case as often. So now you have to pay to try to keep those guys around, but then you also still have to just focus on taking a player that you really like, because if you're chasing the measurables now, you're going to get to a spot where you're not going to land a player that you probably like as much, most of the time, because I think chasing the measurables will lead you to potentially reaching on a guy that's not the top of his position, but also just has measurables, but at the same time also doesn't have the things that you like within his game. So you're getting two things that's like, all right, these kind of come together, but it's not like we're just taking a player that we really like that maybe misses some of the traits that we would love. Like,
to add to this, what made Aiden Hutchinson different is Hutchinson had both. Aiden Hutchinson had the outstanding traits. He also had the production on top of that as well as all the character, the toughness. He had everything going for him, which is why he was the 2 pick.
Remember, Jack Campbell, he didn't have the longest arms. And even if you think about that draft, Jahmyr Gibbs, right, went 12. I thought he really started to break out against Baltimore. He went 12, though, right? Like, he was running back 2 off the board, but that could have been their number one running back. He went 12, and he had 900 some yards. He had a very good rookie season, but I didn't think it started really to click until that Baltimore game when I thought we really felt the breakout there. Jack Campbell had a very shaky rookie season. He could have been their top linebacker that year, went pick 18, was playing on the ball at times. That's not all his fault, but the point is, like, a lot of these guys were developmental guys, and now that you're picking towards the back end, that's why the focus has to be just forget the position. I think the most likely positions that the Lions could end up getting that feel like they could walk away comfortably saying, like, that was our best player at that position is linebacker potentially, right? Depending on where Jahad Campbell goes and where you have him ranked, I think that they're kind of bunched up towards the top. I love Demetrius Knight. I don't think he'll go round 1. Carson Schwessinger, I think, could also be thrown in that conversation, but that's a position where there's enough kind of conversation where I think you could look at that and say, we got our best off-ball backer specifically, not like as much of an edge rusher. You could also probably, and that could happen around 28, right? That could be a short little move up. That could happen sitting at 20. That could happen moving back depending on who your top linebacker is. At safety, that could definitely happen, right? Whether it's Nicky Manwari, Malachi Starks, Maybe it's a different safety, right? Maybe it's a different safety. Maybe it's Jalen Reed, right? Maybe it's Xavier Watt. Maybe it's one of these different safeties. But for me, like that's very possible that you could end up getting a pick, getting that player around your pick, and you could feel like, hey, we got the best safety in this year's class, safety / nickel in this year's class. If you want to throw Jahdae Barron into the mix, and I would say interior offensive line also has that chance because there's so many guys that have the flexibility to play on the inside that if you identify a guy that maybe is playing tackle, but you like him more as a guard, you could consider him the best interior offensive lineman. And those guys tend to go a little bit later if they're viewed as interior offensive linemen around your spot, right? For me, Donovan Jackson is, of course, way up there. Tyler Booker is slightly the edge for my favorite. Then I would throw Garrett Gray-Zabel if you haven't seen the interior offensive line video, but that's very possible as well. I mean, just if Josh Simmons wanted to fall in lines, want to go that direction, I think he'd be an awesome guard. It's just that a lot of people view him as a tackle. I think he can do both at the next level. He's just coming off the injury. Like someone like that would make some sense too. A different spot now, but you also don't want to kind of change your approach because a lot of these times that's what it's been. So like, was Terion's rookie season better at cornerback than Josh Pascal's last season? That would be a tough case to make, right? Maybe somewhat similar. I could give Josh Pascal the nod. I think he took big steps for us this past year. Piece to be the guy at edge, that kind of thing in this year's draft. And you're like, we got to hit all the traits here. It's going to be difficult to find sitting where you are unless you made a massive jump, which you won't make because that'll be Abdul Carter who will get to 1. But then also you may just be drafting a guy that you like that maybe doesn't have the typical measurables, or he has traits that you buy into, which to me would be similar to essentially what you did with Terion, right? The critical factors that you bought into with Terion that could happen at edge. The Lions could sit there and look at some of these guys and say, look, they got the factors. Maybe they got to put it together. Maybe that's a Braden Swinson. Hey, we got to put it together. But man, when it gets there, a lot of the things we can get to is great. So Lions move back to 34. They got Braden Swinson. I think that'd be a great pick because he has the critical factors to get there. You just want some of the positional development. Because even if I go to guys like Donovan Ezeraku, who are looked at more polished, for me, I think he's a very good pass rusher. I think he's in a similar category as a Josiah Stewart, but with his body control. But even in a lot of areas like a Shamar Stewart, I don't think he stands out positionally. I don't think his hand usage is outstanding. I think it's good. I don't think he's an outstanding ability to shed blocks. I think it's slightly above average. I have the same thing with Shamar Stewart. I think he's a below average tackler right now. Right? Agility is very questionable. He's average in football intelligence. I think you get a better feel right there from Ezeraku, kind of the feel to get to the ball. So at that point, if you are going to end up going that position, to me, it makes sense to say that the Lions will probably go with the guy that they have those traits that they love, and then everything else is like, all right, this is going to be a process, but we love the traits and then obviously the character. So if they have the traits and the character, that could be an early edge pick for the Lions, not looking to necessarily say, man, we got to get it all here. We have to get it all in this pick. So we must have the measurables. You must have the length. You also must have the juice. Like, that's just, and he must have the production. That's just not going to happen at 28, right? The only guy that I think could get somewhat close to that range would be a Michael Williams. And even he doesn't have the outstanding production because where he lined, he's coming off the injury. I thought Michael was great, though. He's my edge 3. Maybe someone like that, right? Or the Jalen Walker I traded up for, which again, still needs development for me. I just think he has an elite trait, which not many guys I have in this class. Maybe like an Emeka Egbuka with his hands. There's not many guys in this class that I think have elite traits. I think he has an elite trait to just get after the quarterback. So that's why I'm like, all right, take the swing. The rest is development. We'll see how much he gets on the field. That's why it's worth it to me. But not to go to like 3, not to go like 9. Like you're going to have to give up too much to go to the top 10. So I think that's what we can anticipate from the Lions in this year's draft. And I'll also throw in receiver to the mix. The Lions could potentially walk away with the guy they feel is their top receiver, right? I think Golden will probably go at 12, but if he doesn't, you could walk away. Like there's a kind of a jam-packed area there with Tet McMillan, Matthew Golden. Some people have Egbuka, Luther Burden. I really like Burden. There's just off the field cool stuff coming up now. Jack Besh. Like that's kind of where, to me, the receiver, you could look at and feel like, hey, we got the best receiver because they're so tight, kind of like edge rusher. The move they made last year with Terion, like they didn't come in saying, oh, we have to go get up and get this guy. It's just like, yo, he kept falling. And if you remember, like we all remember, it feels similar to me. Terion Arnold was thought of like, yo, this guy could go top 10. If y'all remember all the mocks we did, like this guy was flying super high in the draft. So the idea of getting him was almost like, yeah, it's just not going to happen. And it happened one time in our mocks. I had to go more aggressive than they were. I ended up going up with Chicago to make that trade happen. And in this case, similarly, if they could do it with a team like Green Bay, because it just so happens that nobody takes a flyer on him, that's where I think Campbell could fall into place. I think Jahdae Barron could be interesting for them as well because they could see it like that. But it's just, it's like, yo, it could be very similar to how last year played out. They got Terion, and the idea was you were going to have to be more aggressive for that. You didn't have to be more aggressive for that. So it worked out. Things I took away from the whole Brad Holmes thing is like, number one, he's going to draft a receiver somewhere. I think ideally they would like to trade back if you told him like, hey man, what would make sense? Yeah, trading back makes sense. And I don't disagree with that either. Trading back does make sense. In this case, I had no calls to do it. Brad has told us he has received no calls to move out of 28. But as I found out like this, everything changes as soon as the draft gets started, essentially. So just because that's the truth now doesn't mean it's going to continue to be the truth. I just found it. Doesn't mean it's going to continue to be the truth. But like as of now, he's had no conversations moving down. So I think he understands that like that could change during the draft. But if you were a team at like the middle of the first round, I don't know how comfortable you are with moving back. Like TD, the Dolphins, who's at 13, wanted to move back a lot. I wanted to move up with him because I thought I thought moving to 13 wasn't going to get me Jalen Walker. Like I didn't think it was going to happen at 13. So I was like, look, dude, we can lay. That's why the whole having a contingent trade was kind of the trend I think I started here, because there was a trade that went down before the draft started with Minnesota. And I was like, yo, the only way I'm trading with these dudes, and I was talking to all the producers the night before, I was like, if I'm trading, I have to know that he's there. And we'll essentially do like this. I make the trade. If we get the trade done, we can void it. So if the player's not there, it just becomes voided. And I think that's kind of a trend I started because every trade was like that for me. It was like, if he's not there, I'm not trading up. Moving up, case by case, every year is different, as we kind of just laid out there. So I think that makes all the sense in the world. It's just about, you have a pool of players that you have in a similar spot. And for me, that's probably how it would play out if I sat back at 28, that I'm going to have similar players in a similar spot. Like if you told me, okay, Shamar Stewart's here, James Pierce is here, Malachi Starks is here, Tyler Booker's here, so is Donovan. Like I'd be in a spot, I'm like, okay, yeah, there's multiple players that if I can go back to 35, I'd be willing to go back, because there's not like a huge, like I would prefer maybe this guy over the other, Derek Harmon. Like he was asking me like, what I've done. I was like, dude, I had multiple guys that I would have taken here still. That's where the bucket could fall into play. And big trades, essentially, like large swings that they've tried to make that didn't happen. JMO was just so happened to be the one that actually did go down. It's crazy that happened with Minnesota, but that probably tells you all you need to know is that Minnesota was the one deal that they could get done to get there, because that's how difficult it is to move that high in the draft, and things just kind of have to work out. The Za'Darius thing, conversations just aren't really happening anymore, but to me, that's just a price thing. Lions know how much we're willing to pay. We're getting cheaper here. And it just is what it is. Like, yeah, I'm not surprised. Like, after we found out, felt they couldn't afford him, immediately I thought, Za'Darius isn't going to be a Lion again. Like, he's not coming back. And if they're telling us they can't pay that price, he's going to believe that he's worth more than what the Lions are going to be willing to give. And I think that's fair on both sides, but I think that's why there's been no conversations. It's not a surprise because, I think we pointed out, like, to me, if that deal does get done, the only way something like that gets done is he has to look at it and say, and everybody view is that, you're taking a lot less than what you're worth. A lot less than what you're worth. And he doesn't need to do that. Teams can always use pass rushers. The Lions are not going to give him that right now. So they wouldn't want to have him back. They told us, we can't afford him. And if that's what's laid out, it's like, all right, I believe him. They can't afford him. So something's probably not going to get done here.
The player's contract's going to end. Another player, unfortunately, might be coming off an injury. And it's going to be something different every single offseason. So if you're trying to chase what happened last season of, oh man, this guy's contract's and if you're trying to chase, this guy got an injury, like you're just kind of getting into a cycle that I think is a little bit dangerous to get into. So that's why I've been more of a, just get the best player, because even look, we loved Rakestraw. And unfortunately, he just wasn't as healthy, but so he wasn't able to help as much last year. But we're real excited and looking forward to what he's going to be able to bring this year. So there is just, and I said before, there's just a level of patience that you just have to play. But when you start,
this is the part that
need,
I think
it's
is
that right need might make sense for right now at this time. But what we make these picks for future investments. And I know we live in a society that everything is right now, boom, right now. And I understand it too, just from, when a player gets drafted and so much, fascination is made about the draft and, people are excited about it. People want to see it right now. And, they don't want to wait and be patient, but there's just patience. I mean, it's no different than when we made that massive jump to get Jameson Williams. He was coming off his injury. We knew maybe he could play a little bit late in the season, but weren't planning on it, so.
See, that took me back when he said that, because I do remember we took JMO and all the conversations like, yo, when is he going to be available? When is he going to play? And I think everybody was kind of hoping it would be sooner. I think we all anticipated maybe sooner. Then they told us all right, he's going to be able to play. And just kind of as it rolled along, it's we're not really seeing JMO. like we got to see him a little bit, but it's like, yeah, this guy didn't actually really end up doing anything in his first year. So the idea of 28 not being able to be like, hey, in the future, this guy could get on the field, especially with where our roster is at now versus even when it was then. That was when we were drafting Hutchinson. The roster wasn't in the spot that it is now. Even at 28 for sure, like that's like drafting somebody that may not play that much this year, or not even just not play that much this year, but you understand that it's development. It's going to take time. And, we're not drafting that need to necessarily. Maybe it works out that way and he can play right away, but that's not the goal. You're doing that at 12. They did it at 12. So 28 tells you, like, it could be anywhere. It could be any piece. But that's just the philosophy they've always followed there. After I made that trade and they put me back on the thing at like 28 and they were like, well, who'd you taken? And I was like, well, if the board's like this, I'm taking Malachi Starks. Like that's the first guy that comes to mind. That's who I would take, as I would take Malachi Starks, because for what you're saying, like I can find a spot for him. We'll see what it turns into long-term, but Malachi Starks, for what the conversation being easy had, is like, yeah, if you had to move off one of those safeties, which would stink, Starks would plug in there, right? So he'd plug in ultimately. And year one, I can give him snaps. It may not be as exciting because and I think Malachi Starks is the perfect conversation piece. I'm glad you brought that up. Malachi Starks isn't exciting as much, and people will be like, what are we doing? Because what does he play? And it's like, year one, he'll be our third safety. But that doesn't seem like enough in the first round. But ultimately, if he was on your team, well, next year you need something else.
Or has to play that position. And so that's why I've always been saying, look, we want to get good players. Because if you get a guy that can play a position, the question that you asked, Brad, the 50th time you asked pass rushers, like, well, you can draft a pass rusher every round. You could. It's easy. That's just like a coach told me, man, we want a guy that's 6'4", 250. If we got a guy 6'4", 250, that's easy. What are you guys going to write about that player? He goes, man, that's not working. So we're not going to reach on players just to fill a position. So that's what we won't do. But it's just, you said, like, you're always trying to figure out what we're going to do.
I like this. This is my favorite part.
When like a movie comes out, right?
This is facts, by the way.
When you go to see a movie, you don't know you've never seen a movie. That's the excitement. And so you're fine just watching the movie. And then it's whether the movie's good or bad, and then you can do that. But I don't.
No. See, like this dude's wrong, bro. Let's time out for a second. If this is a movie you really want to see, you don't watch trailers. I'm just telling y'all how like I get if it's not a great movie, you're trying to convince somebody, maybe you've already seen it, like, hey, you should check this out. Maybe you want to show them the trailer. But if it's something that you already know coming in, like, I want to see that movie, you don't watch the trailers. Not in 2025, because these trailers will spoil. Titles spoil things. I put in my title today, edge rusher, trade down. I'm spoiling what we're going to talk about. You don't want that in a movie. If that's a movie you want to see, you don't want the trailer, bro. I'm telling you, you don't want to see the trailer. Look at his face. I don't need to know nothing about what he's thinking about this draft. As long as I know he's drafting, I want to see it. Try to stay away from that with some of the draft stuff. Like, yeah, I had him edge too, right? And that's not including Jalen. Jalen would have been above him. But I don't know anything. I know the headlines, like he's saying. I know what we get written. I don't know a dang thing about the person. I think the biggest thing he said about the character was it's year-round. Like, who's around him. It's a year-round. Character is year-round. I like that. Character is year-round. It's not a situation. It's year-round. You could do something dumb and not have bad character. You know what I mean? Like, you can do something dumb. And I'm not talking about Mike Green specific. I'm just saying in general. Just because you do something dumb doesn't mean you have bad character. And he talked about kind of the trade value thing. And this was cool too. Everybody has their own chart. And I found this in the, I think I recognize a lot of things. There were teams that I talked to, I won't say who, they sent me their trade chart, whatever they're using. They sent me an image of it. And they're like, here, use this. I'm like, bro, I don't want that. Take your trade chart, go trade with somebody else. I'm not talking to the trade chart. I'm talking to you. This is what I'll give you. This is what we're going to do. And I guess I'm closer to Brad in that sense of like, just got to be in the ballpark. We don't need like the numbers that people were like, so there was people in the discussion of other teams having conversations like that. And one dude literally sent me the trade value chart. And he's like, look at the trade value chart. I'm not going to look at the trade value chart. I'll throw you my offer. Here's what I got. That's it. And I left it there. And then obviously as the draft went on, the intrigue grew more. And I think the trade value chart kind of got thrown out the window.